Hello world, I'm Cecelia Sterling. These are the adventures of Super Chick, and today I have a story to share. So I'm a car girl. I have a car dad. And it's been coming up recently, like, oh, I should share some of my good car stories on this program. And then last night it landed. I'm at dinner with a couple friends, and it organically came up. They were sharing stories about their first cars. And I feel like this is a loaded subject, and I'm not exactly equipped or trained to break down like all of the meaning that we might put into our cars. But I will say I think it's a great storytelling session. Like, I loved hearing about their first cars. I loved what they liked about them and what didn't work about them. Literally, one of them didn't have a heater, and this person lived where it was cold, but it was cute. We talked about like like how much the outward appearance of the car mattered and how much the functional internal workings of the car mattered, and the price and the belief systems and all the things, right? So my first car was a Ford Tempo. Not that cute. It's kind of brown. I don't really love brown. But it was a car, and it gave me mobility, agency, independence. And my dad had a body shop, so he would sometimes buy cars that were busted up, fix them up, and then sell them. And this was one of those. And it was actually given to me on Christmas, I think, the year I was getting my driver's license, with a big red bow on it. Just like those fancy, benzo ads during the Super Bowl. A little different. But, what a gift, right? Well, it's a stick shift, so I can't just drive it, even though I'm learning to drive. But I'm going to now learn how to drive a stick shift with my dad. So my dad and I have a distant relationship. We care very much about each other. We see each other occasionally. Like 3 to 5 times a year, maybe, as I'm growing up. That's my guess. So we're not close. So to do something as challenging as learning to do a stick shift with all of the emotions of learning to drive a car and being scared you might get in an accident, being nervous you might wreck, it's a lot, right? It's a lot to do. It's a lot to do with someone who you sort of look up to and trust in one way, but not like so completely, because we're not super close. And so while I don't feel completely safe with him, I feel inspired and determined to learn how to drive a car. I feel really comfortable that he's a good person to teach me. And we don't have a super messy relationship like with all of the stuff I might have with my mom that might then come out during car training, right? So it's pretty specifically, I'm going to learn how to drive stick shift in this car, and he's going to teach me on the railroad tracks. So it's kind of life or death. And then, parallel parked on a steep hill. I'm about to smash the car in. Like, we literally got stuck once on the hill. I'm pretty sure he was helping me parallel park on a hill, because one needs to know that, but maybe a little later in the process when they're actually really good at driving the stick shift, flat, starting, stopping, like that. Well, we probably had plenty of room at the beginning, but then people parked around me, and he was determined to have me get us out of that situation. We literally had to pull up the emergency brake, and I had to ease us out, and he's deciding when to undo and we almost hitting the car in front of us several times. But I got us out. And while I was thinking about that this morning, I was like, when we're in these gritty, resistant situations, we do grow new muscles, right? Which, reminds me of my story last week about the new workout. And I've been thinking a lot about resistance, actually. And so that just that hill, I will never forget being on that hill and trying to get that car out of that parking place. And then I did it. We did it. He had to help for sure. I kept asking him to just take over, and he's like, nope, You're going to do this. But he definitely helped with the emergency brake because it was definitely literally going south more than I think he thought it would. Anyway, I get to drive that car for a while. I do successfully drive a stick shift for all my life. And he gives me a series of different cars that I get to drive on occasion because it's like something that he has for a little while before he sells it throughout high school and even into college a little bit. Although most of the time in college I didn't have a car. Parking tickets, University of Michigan, like holy bejesus. That's talk about another story. But as a graduation gift from college, he gives me a Kia Sportage and he paints it navy and puts on yellow pinstripes. And my dad went to Michigan State. There's a rivalry there. And he wasn't super opposed to me going to Michigan. He wasn't super opinionated about most things I did. But it felt like this extra supportive thing that he made it the colors of my school. Also really cheesy, but it was a cute free car, had very low miles on it. It drove really well. It's a Sportage. I'm like Sporty Spice, right? And there was something about it being cheesy that I actually really liked. Like I didn't have a lot of cheesy dad moments growing up, and it felt really good to receive one in that moment. So that car carries me to California. He and I actually go on a road trip in my process of moving here. And that'll be another story on here for sure. I'd love to have him chime in with his experience of that. But we drive the Sportage and it's a fantastic car. I have to put zero money into it. I drive it to, 80,000 miles or something. It needs a timing belt like most cars do right around that time. And I'm like, a repair. I got to get rid of this car. Because I didn't really know how to handle that part. And it had been years and I wanted to buy my own car. So now I'm craving some independence in a different way, right? Even though it's going to be a financial strap. I'm going to work this out. So I test drive an Audi and I'm like, this is fantastic. I'm a car girl. I like cars that feel like race cars that are not race cars. That you drive on the regular roads. That's my jam. And I don't know myself all that well yet, right? I've had experience with various cars because of what he's exposed me to, but I was primarily, concerned with like, how safe is this and how banged up was it? And where are we in the process of getting it fixed for me to drive? One time, literally, it was like a Ford Fiesta or something. It was so tiny. And my mom said, you need a helmet to drive that car. It's like, yeah, I can't do this. So it's time for me to trade in my car. It actually goes to a donation space where I felt really good about where it was going. I apologize. I don't remember all the details. This was quite some time ago, but I felt really good about where it was going and I got $500 for it. So that's going to be my down payment on my next car. My first car I'm actually going to buy on my own. I love the Audis. There's a woman trying to sell me the car and she takes me on my test drives and I'm like, oh my gosh, maybe I should sell cars. Like I never even had really considered a female being in this space. And she was good, and I would have been really good at that too. It's always in the back of my mind, like, maybe I'm going to go work for Audi. Maybe I will. Maybe I will tomorrow. Let's see. But I love these cars, and I just can't get the financing figured out. Like, it's just, even the, certified used cars, like, it's a little too pricey for me at this time. So let's go to the VW. Same everything, right? Just different price point. No, they don't drive the same. Cecelia, it's the same car. Like, just go in, all the inner workings. Don't get caught up with the facade or like the label or the logo. It's the same car. I think it's the Passat. It's supposed to be the same as the A4, and the Jetta is the same as some other thing. And I drive them, and I'm like, no, they're not the same. And all I want is for them to be the same. The financing is going to work. It's still a big, bite to chew, but I can afford it. But I don't want to drive the car. and I'm frustrated with myself that I call it fancy, but it's not just fancy. It's like, it doesn't have all the pieces that I'm looking for. And I don't know how to name them energetically at this time, right? So it, like, somewhere in this search, I go on a few dates with this guy who's a chef. We go to his restaurant, this group of girlfriends and I, we go to his restaurant sometimes. Super handsome, feels like full-on episode right out of Sex and the City. It's his family restaurant. He's the chef. He drives a motorcycle. He was fantastic to a point. I'm also not able to name all the energetic experiences I'm having with him at this time. Because I don't know myself that well yet, right? Like, I'm still getting to know myself. And so I go on a few dates with him, and one day he's at my house, and instead of the motorcycle, he drove his Volkswagen. And, we had been talking about the fact that I was shopping for a car. And he's like, just go again to Volkswagen. And he was kind of bossy and aggressive. And that's ultimately why I think that might have been the last time I saw him. But there was just something, and I was like, yeah, I just want that to work out. Why don't I like these cars more? So I call the Volkswagen dealer again. And because I'm divinely supported on a regular basis, Lloyd answers the phone, which I just thought was the perfect name for a used car salesman. And I say, Lloyd, can you please just sell me one of these cars? Make it perform for me. You know what I'm looking for. Like, what can we do here? And he says, Cecelia, I'm so glad you just called me right now. And it's kind of like the smile I get on my face when I call the preschool director. So glad you called right now. I'm going to need you to come on down here. I have something very special. Okay. So I literally get in my car and drive to him like he's going to have, I don't know, maybe it's a souped up Volkswagen, or maybe it's an extra on sale and that's going to be the thing that makes it work for me. Or maybe it's who knows, right? What's the configuration here where it's going to land? He has a silver Audi TT that someone has traded in because they've had children and they need a sedan. So I get to buy a certified used Audi TT, which is a race car that you drive on regular streets, stick shift, from Lloyd. And I say, Lloyd, let's get in the car and take it for a test drive. Lloyd, this is a little more than I wanted to spend, but let's talk about like how fabulous it's going to be when I, take my dates in this car. Like, whatever. I don't even remember what I said, except I remember feeding him what I wanted him to say back to me to help me buy the car. And it was a little more than I wanted to spend, but it was still less than the Audi A4s I had been trying to buy. And it was gorgeous. And it was so fast. And what Lloyd helped me name that I was looking for was that I liked a car that's responsive. Guess what else? I like employees that are responsive. I like personal relationships with people who are responsive. It was this huge bit of information, like self-reflection here. Oh, that car was fantastic. I remember taking it to the Del Mar races once with a really good friend of mine, and it was his first time riding in the car with me. He was Italian, and I was just so excited about my new car, and I was like, I'll drive, and he gets in, he's like, yeah, this is nice, and I was like, oh yeah, and I turned the music on, and I was like, this is the theme song for this car, and it was Boom, Boom, Pow, Black Eyed Peas. I could still hear it. It's like, it's like, Pulp Fiction, I think, maybe the music at the very beginning of the song. I mean, it just sounded like the cars revving, purring, and this music is playing, and it was energetic bliss. And I was able to buy the perfect car for me on the perfect day. It all worked out. And that car served me really well. And I remember calling my mom and sort of talking through the logistical bullet points of like, can I afford, if I say I can afford A, B, C, D, can I actually afford this car? Is it okay to buy a race car? Is it okay to buy a fancy car? Is it okay? I was looking for all of these permissions. And I think on some level, I thought she would say, no, it's not okay. And like old belief system, we can't afford that, or we don't deserve that, or this doesn't work for your actual life. And all of the answers to my questions were yes. Yes. And I remember taking it to work. I worked for a theater company at that time, and I used to have to move all these props back and forth. And it had so like, it has a back seat, but it's minuscule. And it has a hatchback, but actually with the back seats down, I could load quite a bit into that space. So it worked quite well for my job, surprisingly. And I remember two of the older guys at the theater talking to me one day when I had just gotten it. And one of them was like, what are you going through, a midlife crisis? And the other man says, she's not going through a midlife crisis. She's a young woman. Like if you bought that car, that might mean A, B, and C. So these are literally directors and actors in theatrical plays. And I realize that we all have these different narratives for things in this particular moment. Like this car means for me that I have financial independence. I have agency. This is actually a very safe all-wheel drive car that gives me the ability to move on giant, crazy freeways in Southern California, right? And it was through having this car that I realized that like a responsive car is a safe car for me. I've had cars on these freeway, like a rental car where it goes kind of slow and I feel it literally in danger. So a performance vehicle feels really important to me for safety reasons, which might not mean that for someone else, right? And its ability to like, if I need you to speed up, I want you to speed up right now. If I need you to brake and slow down, I'm going to need you to do that right now. It had a place for your needs. So the gas and the clutch look like race cars. They were silver with like you could see the circle dots on them. And then there was like a brace for my right knee so you could kind of press into it as you made turns. Oh, that car was supportive. And it was beautiful. And it was fancy. And it was affordable. And it was a stick shift. I drove it really well. And I'm just so grateful for like the opportunity last night to even revisit this whole experience. And you just got to celebrate your wins over and over and over again, right? Like how fantastic I called him at that particular moment. And all Lloyd wanted was to get rid of that Audi because it wasn't a Volkswagen. He's trying to sell his new cars, right? So how great for him. But like it just moved in the right way on the right day. Chef boyfriend helped out too. We all give a little piece. And then when I turned that car in to get my first BMW, I got more for it than it was worth. And the guy said it to me several times. To make all these numbers work for what you're willing to pay and us to get this lease deal done, I just keep having to increase what I'm giving you for the car that you're trading in. I'm paying you a lot more than what it's worth. And I'm like, oh, honey, there is no price you could pay that would be more than what that car is worth. And I don't know if like cars are materialistic to you or great tools for you. It all depends on your stories and what, your beliefs are around different aspects of your life. And for me, a car is such an incredible tool. And of course, it comes from a special place in my heart because it's something I share value-wise with my dad. My dad had hot rods back in the 50s, And he and my uncle, like one of their pastimes was to drive by the police station, rev their engines so the police would get into their cars and chase them. And they knew their cars were faster and they would win. Literal cat and mouse in this small town in Michigan, right? And like that energy was with me and still is. Like when I put my car in turbo mode, I get after it. It's pretty great. It's pretty great the joy we can find in this material world using tools like cars. I love the movie. Certainly, I love watching the movie Cars with Lillian, and she loves it too. I love that lens and like their way of talking about the American landscape, literally and figuratively, through cars. I'm a car girl. What can I say? And with that, I'll say ciao for now. I'm Cecelia Sterling, and these are the adventures of Super Chick. Send me your car stories.